Compensation disputes. There were always some type of dispute about where the compensation was coming from. How is the broker going to be compensated? What is a realtor split? I don't understand if the listing agent, I already agreed to X percentage. How is it split between a buyer's agent and regardless of the fact that it's always been on contract, it hasn't been very well explained according to this DOJ investigation. It needs to be clear cut, black and white, and if they can't guarantee that the agents are going to explain it correctly, their answer to that is we'll put a separate buyer broker agreement in place first before the house is ever shown in the beginning. And then, of course, it's going to eliminate a lot of the legal and ethical violations that we have seen in the past. The legal and ethical standards can be broken without clear understanding of the expectations, both by the buyers and by the real estate agents. Buyer agency agreements are going to allow us to provide that true framework for resolving disputes and to protect the interests of both the buyer and the realtor that's representing and the broker and brokerage relationship that everybody is working under. Brokers, hear me. You're going to need to get more involved. You're going to have to do your job too. You're going to have to step up and understand that your realtors, if they're working without these agreements, are in a clear violation of a national law. And you're going to need to stop them or you're going to lose your brokerage over it. Key elements of this agreement. The buyer-broker agreement includes a lot of key clauses that are going to outline the terms and the conditions of the relationship of the buyer and the broker. And notice I keep talking about the buyer. I haven't talked about the seller yet. That's a different conversation, and we definitely should talk about it. As of 3 days ago, per this recording, there are brand new exclusive rights of listing sales agreements. I am still going through the red lines as of this morning. Crazy pants. It's affecting every single contract that we have used for years. But there's the nature of the business. And those of us that are going to stay in it and going to do very well at it are going to understand this contract language down to a science. And agents, hear me. You're not lawyers. Don't pretend to be lawyers. You need to stick to the contracts as they're written. You need to fill in the blanks as they're allowed. And if you start doing fancy language, you had better be using the inside consult or your 1-800 legal services to make sure that you are doing things properly, ethically, and you are not dredging into what is someone else's legal responsibility. You got to be able to understand key elements of this new agreement, by the way, to help you understand the contract and so that you can follow through with the benefits of your client. You're going to need to explain the type of agreement, for example. We at Keystone are using an exclusive agreement. You, Mr. Buyer, Mrs. Buyer, agree to work with me, an individual named agent and brokerage throughout the searching and the finding of a home to procure and negotiate to your satisfaction. I will be compensated for my work. This is what I have to get compensated. Hint, this does not mean that they are the ones that are going to pay that compensation. That's part of the negotiating strategy and always has been. That has never changed. As a general rule in the state of Florida, the seller has offered a marketable compensation for the buyer or a buyer's agent to be brought to be negotiated against. Again, no change, and I'm sure none of the listing agents are going to change that either. But the listing agents are going to have to be very open and very honest about, hey, let me make sure to call your special attention to this section of our exclusive listing agreement that says that I am offering through my brokerage X percentage to represent your home for sale. Are you acceptable to me offering a portion of that percentage to a buyer's agent if they help us procure a buyer faster? These are how the conversations are going to go. Duties. It will absolutely outline the broker responsibilities better so that people understand this, and that's important. Compensation. It will define how the broker will get paid and how much. Again, there's a negotiation throughout this process. There are, from the second you're going to go see the very first house, The broker or realtor that you're working with is going to make a phone call to the listing agent and see what type of compensations or concessions are being offered by the seller to make it more attractive than just the house itself for us to come in and view the property. Duration. It's going to determine how long this agreement is going to last. You don't just sign a contract without an end date. Otherwise, it's not legally enforceable. Termination. It's also going to explain how either party, either the buyer or the buyer's agent, can terminate this contract. Confidentiality. This is also going to ensure that any personal or financial information is going to remain confidential. It has always been in place that way, but the new buyer broker agreement fully documents it again in a separate form for the buyer to sign so that they have additional visibility into what's being done for them. Quick pro tip: go back and review your fiduciary duties regularly. Remember, your primary responsibility as a real estate agent to your client is loyalty, confidentiality, full disclosure, obedience, reasonable care, and accounting. Remember, this ensures that you always act in your client's best interest and maintains that trust. And you can elevate it even farther by being a single agent in your relationship to make sure that you're exclusive to them as well, and not just exclusive to the transaction. I'm sure there's a few people out there that even maybe have some misconceptions as to what's next. How's this going to affect my business? How's this going to affect the livelihood? Why on earth did I leave my full-time job to become a real estate agent so that I could just have to redo everything that I have put into practice over multiple years? There's a lot of misconceptions that I have already heard on the internet about the buyer broker agreements, and that's going to cause some confusion with your clients, with yourself. Let's face it, they went to multimedia long before they found you. They may have even found you on media itself. But it's going to cause some hesitation amongst both your buyers and your brokers. Here's some of the most common myths that I've dug into, and we need to set the record straight about it. Let's make these easier. Myth number one: buyer broker agreements are binding traps. A lot of buyers are worried that if they sign these agreements, it's going to lock them in and force them to work with an agent that they may not have a relationship with yet and might end up not liking them. Reality is that all of these agreements have termination clauses. If things aren't working out, either you, Mr. Agent, or you, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, can terminate. It needs to have just cause, but you need to have a real business conversation. There is no more who's the next realtor in line. You're going to have to sign, and I mean it, you're going to have to sign an agreement before any real estate agent can show you a home, because that's what is now being forced upon us by law. You should absolutely be obligated to working with someone exclusively, until which time that relationship is no longer workable for either of you. Myth number two: this new agreement only benefits the broker. There are some clients out there that think these agreements are just to ensure that the brokers get paid. I mean, sure, they protect the broker's interest, but they also protect the buyer by ensuring that you get the dedicated representation and clear responsibilities from your broker or agent representative. It is critically important that you understand that we have always been paid for our services. You, as the customer, may not have really concerned yourself of where the money came from, as long as it didn't come directly out of your pocket. And yes, there is some risk out there that you, Mr. Customer, may have to pay for our services too, if the selling side is not willing to negotiate some of that as a concession. You have every right to negotiate that with us, as it's always been. Myth number three: there's no flexibility in the terms. This is a contract. They're locking you into scope, etc. This is another big misconception. The terms of the agreements are not set in stone. Actually, many parts, like the how long the listing agreement lasts or how long this buyer-broker agreement lasts, the services are included in writing for you, and these can all be negotiated. If you want to work with a discount brokerage, then you should expect discount services, meaning they're not going to do everything for you that a full service brokerage does. And believe me, there's a difference. I want you to think back. You younger folks aren't going to know what I'm talking about, but I want you to think back to the full service gas station days. When you pulled in to get gas, the gentleman at the pump or the young lady at the pump filled your car with gas. While they were filling your car with gas, you never left the comfort of your seat. They were doing the windshield, they were checking your oil, they were popping the hood and make sure everything looks okay so you could safely go down the road. They were kicking the tires, they were checking the pressure. They were doing things you probably should have done before you ever left the house. Promise you, none of you can even look at me straight in the face and say, I do that every day before I leave the car out of my garage. If it wasn't for 500 sensors on your car going off, you wouldn't even know it was time to change the oil again. Full service. Discounted service is what you get now. You're still paying for the gas. You're getting out of the car. You're pumping it yourself. If you want to put windshield wiper fluid or anything like that in your car, get your butt into the convenience store and go buy it and do it right there at the pump yourself. Note, price of gas didn't go down by you doing it. You didn't pay for the additional service. You still had to buy the gas. You still had to get your butt back on the road. If you want to work with a discount brokerage, if you want to pull in and pump the gas yourself, go right ahead. But I'll promise you, you miss something. And you miss something every time. And God forbid you got 15 feet down the road and didn't realize that you had a tire that was already running low. Or you had an oil pressure gauge that wasn't working correctly and you are critically low on oil. And a realtor, someone with the additional ethical training and responsibilities for you as a client, is going to be there for you to make sure you get safely to your destination of buying your next home without all of these additional caveats for you to lose sleep over every single night. Flexibility in terms is exactly why this agreement is so important to you. Now let's talk about some of the client conversations. Scripts, starter success. All right, agents. If you're going to speed through any part of all of this, this is the part that you're looking for. This is the fun part. Let's talk about how do you have these conversations with your clients. Let's get into the discussion and start that sometimes you're going to feel like this is a bit daunting. It doesn't have to be. Here's some easy, very effective ways to break the ice, build the rapport that you need, and keep that dialogue flowing smoothly. Feel free to play this section back, tag it, do what you've got to do. But these are how you should open up and introduce the buyer brokerage agreement. Starting this conversation on the right foot is super important. They're going to be on the watch list for it. Trust me, starting next week, the internet is going to start blowing up about everybody starting to see these new agreements, depending on what state they're in. Some of them start as early as Monday of this next week. This is going to help you cover all the key points, like understanding what your client needs, discussing what the agreement is, and outlining the steps in the home buying process. Focus. That's what this is about. This is about the client needs a little bit more insight earlier in the process of how they're going to buy their home. A checklist will always ensure that nothing is missed. It's going to help you feel confident from the very start. It's going to make sure that you're not just getting your gas pumped. They're checking all of those other things that you need to smoothly enjoy your trip and your travel down the road.